This is a video about elderberry cuttings and what to do with the cuttings, how I took them, and how to use them to grow your own elderberry plants. So if you have received cuttings from me, you have received a bundle of 10-ish or so cuttings that are of various widths. The cuttings come from different parts of the elderberry shrub. The parts that are thicker come from the bottom, the parts that are thinner come from the top. There are leaf nodes on each cutting, and there are these other bumps which I think are nodes as well that are going to turn into roots as they're submerged in water. These cuttings are pretty long. I sent out long cuttings because you can stick them straight into the earth, or you can cut them and make them into smaller cuttings. It's up to you. So the ones that are bigger are going to be closer to the base of the elderberry, and for that reason those ones are going to root more readily. Elderberry are designed to root towards the base because they're designed to do what's called layering, where if you lay a branch down, these nodes are going to grow roots, and that's because of the way the region where they grow is a region that often floods, and then things get knocked down, and then it would be filled with silt or soil, and then those would root again. Elderberries do spread rhizomatically, so they're a plant that's pretty easy to take cuttings from, root, or layer, or just to encourage them to spread. So the smaller ones are going to have less starch in them, and they're going to root as well. I generally have takes cuttings from the smaller ones that I will then put into a pot, and then I'll nurse them. The big ones are going to be really great for just shoving in the ground and ignoring them. So the the recommendation is to put them into the soil 60%. 60% of the whole thing should be in the soil, and so each of these could be cut in half easily. And then put into a pot. I wouldn't cut the big ones in half. I would leave them big and just stick them in the ground as far as possible, or in a pot with soil and lots of sand. I have rooted elderberries in soil without much sand, and I've had success with that too. If you do cut them into pieces, you're going to have smaller pieces to work with, and those ones are going to be better for tending in a pot, or paying attention to and keeping an eye on, just because they have less they're going to be less vigorous than the big ones. Mama. No. So what are you going to do with these? So you can take a big one and you can just stick it in the earth. Find a piece of bare ground or whatever, and then stick it in. It's not a great spot. Stick it in about 60%. The cuttings that I've taken all should have nodes towards the top of them. For leaves, I leave those out. The leaves aren't going to provide a lot of nourishment as it's rooting. The nourishment that it gets from rooting is going to be from stores that are inside the cutting, but having leaves at the top is going to help it once it creates roots and is ready to start growing. These smaller ones can be put into a pot, and like this one, and 60% in the bottom, and then just keep it moist as much as possible. Again, having some nodes at the top. One of the rules for cuttings that you're rooting is to have 2 leaf nodes out of the soil, 2 leaf nodes underneath the soil, because elderberry roots so readily, I'm not super concerned about how many nodes are up and how many nodes are underneath, again, because all of the little dots could potentially become roots. So I have done a lot of tending elderberry cuttings in soil. I definitely have an attrition rate. This is part of the reason why when I'm sending out bundles, I'm sending out bundles of 10, because I want you to get at least, you know, a good chunk, a good start on growing your elderberries. My attrition rate for putting them in pots and growing them in pots is definitely more than half. I don't know what the attrition rate would be for just sticking a cutting straight into the earth. It probably depends on how wet the soil is, how long the soil is wet. If you stick it straight into the earth early in the spring, like this time of the spring before it starts leafing out, you should have a better chance that it's going to root, just with the moisture from the spring rains. However, if it's dry where you are and you stick it in the earth, you're going to want to keep it watered as much as possible. So as far as how I took the cuttings, I just took cuttings from some pretty old plants and then just chopped them up. I tried to focus on long stretches that are fairly straight, and you know, selecting healthier looking plants. Once your elderberry gets established, you can take cuttings by just clipping off the ends and then rooting those, or taking one whole long piece and then cutting that into sections, or you can bend it over and layer it, though the elderberry roots so easily that I don't generally do layering with elderberries. I do layering with other things. Black currants, I really like to layer those so that I get a nice plant the next year. You get a better quality plant in the following year from layering than taking a cutting the year before and then rooting it in the soil. The plant's going to just be more vibrant if it's rooted while it's still attached to the mother plant. I think that's, so where to plant your elderberry. Elderberry are generally grow at forest edges. They do like full shade or full sun if they can get full sun. I've seen them growing in the forest in full shade and still flower and fruit, though that's not very common. I suppose it wasn't full shade, it was dappled shade, but it was a full canopy overhead. They like a well-drained loamy soil. So a soil that has some sand in it would be nice. Topsoil with humus, manure, compost is nice. If you're at a place that has clay, like where I live, it's nice to add some, add a nice, gallon or two of soil wherever you're planting elderberry so that it can get established and have plenty of nutrients to get going. They make nice edges to yards. They can get to be, one plant can get to be 12 feet wide, 12 feet tall. For growing, for berries, for harvesting flowers and berries, it's nice to keep them small, not just short, but also like small in diameter. And you can do that basically by cutting down all of the new growth every other year, so that if you had, say 2 patches that you were managing, one patch would be first year growth one year and the other patch would be first year growth another year. You can prune them less than that. You could prune like one side of a patch one year and prune the other side of the patch another year. That would be another way to do it. It can be really tough to harvest berries when they're 12 feet in the air and in the middle of a bush that's 12 feet in diameter. That's the info about elderberry. These are black elderberry. These are the Sambucus nigra, which is the European variety. There is Sambucus canadensis, which is a North American variety. I'm not growing that right now, though it is something that I'm wanting to grow. The North American red elderberry is useful for medicine as well, and I have friends who are experimenting with that. The berries are not used in the same way that the blackberries are, though the other parts of the plant, the leaves and roots and stems and bark of the red elderberry are used, similar to how the black elderberry is used. It's a great plant for really intense infectious disease, flus, SARS, coronavirus. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to share, and hope you enjoy growing these berries.